What are imposter feelings? Feelings of self-doubt, insecurity, discomfort, and/or incompetence, despite evidence that you are welcome, worthy, deserving, and capable. Feeling uncomfortable, feeling out of place, feeling like you don't belong, when your environment is telling you that you don't belong, that is not imposter feelings. That is you having a healthy response to your environment. So I want to get this very, very clear. Imposter feelings are not possible when your environment is in fact signaling to you in ways both implicit and explicit that you are not welcome. If you feel unwelcome when you're not welcome, that's just you responding to your environment in a healthy way, and that's a different conversation to have. Imposter feelings are this really unique, persistent feeling of unbelonging in spaces that are communicating explicitly to you that you do belong. Even though the data that you're getting tells you this is okay, in the back of your mind, you can't help but feel like it's not. 5 primary hallmarks of this thing. As I list them, you might just think a little bit about if any of these have ever presented themselves to you. Self-undervaluation, feelings of being out of place, conspicuous, not belonging, undeserving, persistent, often internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud, a willingness to ignore or refuse the value of your own accomplishments and achievements, and my personal favorite, a tendency to attribute success to external factors such as luck or timing or team, rather than internal factors such as intelligence, talent, or work ethic. These are the 5 big hitter feelings, not a comprehensive or exhaustive list, but what I have seen in my 20 years of working with students, the things that people are most consistently reporting to me when they're struggling with this thing we would call imposter syndrome. Here's what it sounds like in an advisor's office. I'll be sitting in class and the door to the lecture hall will open and I realize I'm low-key worried that it might be someone from admissions coming to revoke my acceptance. It's part of this quiet, nagging feeling I have that my being here has to be a mistake or an oversight or a glitch, like I must have slipped through the cracks somehow and it's only a matter of time before somebody figures it out. It's that moment in your internal monologue. Oh, shit. You feel suddenly exposed. You feel suddenly exposed, like something is wrong. Something is wrong. The other thing I love about this particular quote is you'll notice here, this is not a completely debilitating, right, experience. It's a low-key worry, a quiet, nagging feeling. So this isn't something that stops us from moving through the world and doing what we need to do, but it's always there, and it gets louder at particular moments, especially when we come across difficulty or failure. So there's what it is and what it looks like and what it sounds like, but what I'm going to argue for you today is that it's how we talk about it as a society where the problem is. This, by the way, is a search for imposter phenomenon, not even imposter syndrome. How to fight back, how to battle the types of imposter syndrome, psychology today, how I cured myself of imposter syndrome. We even have this wonderful cottage industry of YouTube videos, the most ironic of which is how to cure imposter syndrome for pre-meds and medical students. Imposter syndrome causes, signs, symptoms, diagnosis. We talk about imposter syndrome 2 ways. Either as a psychological phenomenon to be managed, mitigated, treated, or cured. That's the syndrome language that you're so familiar with. Not the name it was given when it was created, by the way, by 2 female faculty members in the 1960s who referred to it as imposter phenomenon. And then popular culture got a hold of it and said, syndrome's better. And we still, to this day, are much more likely to refer to it as a syndrome. If we're not, in the 80% of the time we talk about it as a psychological phenomenon to be managed, mitigated, treated, or cured, we are talking about it as a moral failing. Why is this deeply pathologized, super fraught way of thinking about this thing so prevalent? Why have we, as a culture, bought in so deeply to this notion that these things are bad and that we need to fix them as soon as possible? It's incumbent upon us to fix this brokenness. First of all, it's incredibly prevalent. Ironically or not, it's also more prevalent in high-achieving populations. There are multiple peer-reviewed studies to suggest meaningful negative impacts associated with imposter phenomenon, including pay gaps, achievement gaps, and persistence gaps in both educational and workforce settings, which means that people who report experiencing this thing are more likely to have negative outcomes associated with it. We also know that it is linked, not causation, but correlation between other wellness issues such as anxiety and depression, meaning we are more likely to see higher rates of anxiety and depression when people are also telling us they experience imposter feelings. And we know it's more prevalent among minority populations. And here, by that, I mean simply when someone can perceive a meaningful difference between themselves and the majority of the people around them. So what do we do about this? Do I give you a list of 4 or 5 steps that you're supposed to follow so you'll never experience imposter syndrome again? No. I don't think that that's how we do this. I think there's a better way. And it involves reimagining how these things work in the first place. And to do that, I'll just draw your attention to one of the most wonderful TED Talks on the internet. This is Professor Kelly McGonigal, How to Make Stress Your Friend. This is a very, very smart talk. If you have 14 minutes and 16 seconds, I highly recommend it. She's a stress psychologist. She gives an extraordinary TED Talk about a career's worth of findings where she discovers that when people come to their stress psychologist for stress, what are they always looking for? Stress reduction, stress management, stress relief. Relieve my stress, help me manage my stress, help me mitigate my stress. And she started to realize over the course of her career that always being the first discussion immediately casts the stress response in a negative light, and that perhaps some of the outcomes people were experiencing from their stress outcomes wasn't about the stress itself, but was about their belief that the stress response was negative. In other words, not doing any stress education about the eustress curve, for example. She comes to the conclusion very intelligently and perhaps intuitively, when you change your mind about stress, you can change your body's response to stress. And so my argument would be here really quickly, and we're going to perform it now. What if we were able to change our mind about these imposter feelings that we all experience? And if we could change our mind about them, could we start to mitigate some of the negative effects that have been measured that are associated with this thing? Self-undervaluation, feeling out of place, fear of being exposed as a fraud, a willingness to ignore or refuse the value of your own accomplishments and achievements, and attributing success to external rather than internal factors. What if we change our perception of these like 25 degrees? What if instead of being self-undervaluing, what if we are modest or unassuming or shy? I mean, just bear with me here. What if that's the thing that we're calling self-undervaluation? What if instead of feeling out of place or not belonging or undeserving, what if that's just being new to your environment? Are we afraid of being exposed as a fraud, or are we just vulnerable and unfamiliar? Are we unwilling to acknowledge the value of our own contributions and achievements, or do we have a generous ethos? And do we attribute success to external rather than internal factors, or are we just a humble person? This yellow list of qualities is a pretty attractive list of qualities. And it's a list of qualities I so often see in the very same students who are coming to me to tell me that they are experiencing imposter feelings. But they wouldn't list it like it's listed in yellow. They would list it the way it's listed in white. The other thing no one's talking about is here are some other characteristics that we find associated with people who report imposter feelings. Consistently high achieving, high self-performance standards, enthusiastic to celebrate team over self, alert, adept readers of the environment, hungry for feedback, and willing to grow. It is not at all surprising that I see a lot of imposter feelings in my military-connected students, because I also see this set of qualities in my military-connected students and my non-traditional students broadly. This is a list of qualities that I want to hire. This is a list of qualities that I want to recruit. This is a list of qualities I want to work with on a project. This is a list of qualities I want coaching my kids on the soccer field. This is a list of qualities I want holding public office. And they're all intimately connected to the same set of people who claim to experience imposter feelings. Are we suffering from imposter syndrome, or are we modeling something different? Are we suffering from imposter syndrome, or are we having a healthy response to aspiration? This, by the way, is the thing that connects every single student I have ever worked with who has come to me and said, this is how I feel. If you look me up on LinkedIn, you'll see the word imposter in my description. Because I think we need to start owning this word in a little bit of a different way. And the last thing I'll say is that telling my students that what they are feeling is okay is probably the single most important intervention to them moving past it. The bad news is there is no cure. The great news is there is no cure. Thank you so much for your time, and I'd love to get questions if you have them.